Okay guys, back again for a quick video here for you. We've got a cold front blowing across the state right now. It's blowing the same 35 outside. We're about to get about 10 inches of rain, and the air temp's going to drop from 91 to 46 degrees in the next couple hours. So I thought we were done with winter down here in South Florida, but Mother Nature had other plans. So had to cancel a trip because it's not safe to be out there. It's going to be lightning and all that. So kind of sitting at home bored. So I thought I'd shoot this little video for you guys to kind of go over some little tweaks you could do to a bait that I've been having a lot of success with. So real quick to backtrack, typically on my trips, I don't fish with my customers unless they insist that I fish with them. But what I will do when we get to an area is I might pick up a bait that I haven't been fishing with in that area over the past few days. So let's just say I'm fishing submerged eelgrass on the lake and we're catching them on a burner worm and a chatterbait. Probably give each of my customers one of those, right? I'll probably say, one of you throw the burner worm, one of you throw the chatterbait. And then I might pick up something that I haven't been throwing or even seen anyone around me throwing, like a spinnerbait, a jerkbait, a fluke, a spook, like we're gonna talk about today. And one, you might pick up on a little niche deal, right, that no one else has kind of picked up on. So if I catch 2 or 3 fish, I'll just cut their stuff off, put one of those on each of their rods, and then sometimes we have a hell of a day, right? So that opens that up. It also helps me expand my horizons on baits and gain confidence in baits that I wouldn't otherwise when out here fishing, right? They wouldn't be my first thing to pick up on a tournament morning. And that's kind of what's been going on with this spook. I've been throwing a super spook my entire life. Okay, it's a staple down here in South Florida, especially down in the Everglades. More giant bass caught on this thing down in the Glades than anything else. But also out here on Okeechobee, there's a lot of old school regulars that just live and die by this thing. And what I mean by that is if there's 5 rods on their deck, they have 3 different colored spooks or walking baits on 3 of them. Okay, I mean, that's all they use. And for good reason. They catch big ones. They have a lot of drawing power. They catch numbers. And the other thing about them that is a big misconception is most people think to only pick this up on a warm, overcast day. Totally wrong. And you know, what's pretty crazy is one of the reasons I got back into really trying to dial in the spook was shiner fishing. You know, when we're shiner fishing out here on this lake, we'll find these wind-blown hyacinth or pennywort mats, and we'll throw these big shiners up against them and let them sit there. And even on the coldest bluebird sky day, right, the complete opposite of what you want for topwater, these 7-8 pound bass will literally get these shiners up on top, and I mean shamu out of the water and backflip on them. And you know, one of the biggest things on the lake is you cannot catch shiner fish on artificial out here. You can't go back to that mat and flip it and catch them or throw a worm around. It doesn't happen. But I'm determined to try and make it happen. So I thought this would be a great bait. A big spook, get up to those mat lines, make a long cast, aggressively walk that bait in place right on the edge of the mat. When it got pulled away too far, let the wind blow it back naturally. As soon as it hit the mat, give it a few twitches and try to call them out from under that mat. Because at the end of the day, they're not hitting that spook thinking, oh, that's a Zara spook, I don't really want that. They think it's a shiner or some kind of bait fish, and they just hit the real thing with everything they had the day before. So don't, you know, bluebird skies, everything you don't want on a topwater day, they will still eat this bait. And it's been really cool. You know, I've been really trying to throw it a lot more over the past year or so. Like I said, I've been getting my ass kicked by guys with this bait for forever, and I've caught them on it since I was 7 years old, but really trying to dial it in is this has been a bait I've been picking up a lot more recently. Just caught one almost 9 or just over 9 the other day on it, and it had a 7 pounder trying to get it out of its mouth, which was pretty crazy. Yeah, so I'm not a big color guy, as you guys know. I've been really favoring towards these gold ones just because I was trying to make it look like a golden shiner. But at the end of the day, all they see is the bottom. So I have like 20 of these, and literally if I'm catching them eating big gizzard shad and I need a white one, I'll literally just spray paint the bottom white. I don't care what anyone tells you, they're not seeing the top and the sides. They're not. They look cool, but they don't see that. So you can just paint the bottom. I mean, I've got a couple of these in the boat that are black on the bottom with my Sharpie. I didn't think they wanted that orange gold color, so I just Sharpied the bottom. It is what it is. I'm not a color guy. But thing that I do a little bit different is I always throw the super spook. Now, if you're fishing throughout the rest of the country, you might throw the regular spook or even the Zero Puppy, the smaller profile bait. And that doesn't mean you're trying to catch smaller fish, but our Florida bass down here, they eat these giant wild shiners, these big gizzard shad. They like bigger forage. So not only you matching it, but sometimes throwing that bigger bait is gonna have more drawing power. It's gonna call those fish from further away to come get it. And a lot of times they'll expand a little bit more effort to come up and eat it if it's worth it. Like if you were to throw a regular size spook, that 6-pounder, looking at it might be like, I don't even feel like going to get that. But if it's a bigger meal, right, that's gonna be worth their while, I feel like you're gonna get a couple of extra bites a day just for that reason, and they'll come up and get it. So I always throw the big one out here, down here in the glades, whatever. I don't put a feather on the back hook. I know a lot of people do. I don't think that matters. It's a confidence thing, but I don't. But here's something I do that's a lot different than a lot of people, I think, is the Super Spook has 3 O-rings or 3 eye keeper, whatever, hook eyes. You're supposed to run 3 hooks on this bait. I only run 2 for a couple of reasons. And this is my saltwater background coming out also. Less hooks a lot of times is more, less is more in this case. Because what's everyone scared about when throwing a spook is losing the fish, right? Pulling hooks is a big thing. That's why we spend so much money on finding the perfect topwater rod with the right bend and fishing the right amount of drag. You know, this is how this spook comes. I buy the saltwater ones. I don't know why, because I rip these hooks off. And I mean, let's face it, you ain't throwing that for bluegill. Those are not saltwater hooks. So I pull them off. But a lot of times with this bait, there's 2 things that'll happen. Let's say a fish really wants this bait and he wants to come up and choke this thing down. If you have 3 hooks on there, sometimes that fish, one hook will interfere with one of the other 2 hooks or doing their job properly. So let's just say he's coming up and wants to hit this thing or whatever. Maybe one of these hooks will kind of foul up on his lip or his head or behind his eye or his whatever. Will touch him and snag him, and will not let one of the other hooks or on the area of the bait where he was really targeting do its job and get him properly hooked. I'm trying to how to explain this better. You know, or let's just say they slap at it. You know, a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, I want it there so if they come up and smack at the bait, they get hooked. Well, would you rather them come up and smack at the bait and its tail hit the middle and it gets tail hooked barely, not even the barb gets in? You foul hook them, you know, when you foul hook that fish for a split second, rips off and then it pulls off, that fish is not coming back to hit this. Whereas if they come up and smack it and maybe they don't get hooked, they're gonna come back and hit it a lot of times, which is actually what that 9-pounder did the other day. Walking the bait, she just crushed it, blew it out of the water, never got hooked. Felt the bait was hard, but I just let it sit, walked it in place a few more times, and she came up and I mean just slow motion, got the whole thing. Now, like I said, what did I just say? She came up from behind. Big misconception. Everyone says bass eat their baits head first. They swallow their baits head first. They're gonna hit it however they can grab it. Big thing to remember. They don't always come up from the front and get it. They hit it however they can, but they're gonna spin it around in their mouth eventually and eat it head first. This fish came up from behind and just slow motioned, like got the whole bait like this. Now, let's just say it was throwing the triple hook. Who's to say this hook right here wouldn't have got her on the bottom lip like it's doing to my thumb right now and like prevented that back hook to getting way down. Now she's hooked on this and she comes up and jumps because she's barely hooked on the middle hook and throws the bait, right? In this case, it was just nothing on her lips. Her mouth was so big, she went right around that 1/0 treb and just closed down, and I just reeled and pulled. And I mean, literally that hook was, you know, in the top of her throat, which is best case scenario. So it just lets if you run 2 hooks, now what I do is I upsize them like 2 sizes. I put some big old, these are Gamakatsu trebs on there. I do run a giant hook, but I only run 2 of them. And your landing ratio is going to go sky high. Yes, you might have some that miss the bait, but you don't hook them. But would you rather have a big one hit it and pull off and then just ruin your whole day, or one just smack at it and not get hooked. And maybe you can come back and catch that fish either in 5 minutes, or maybe she hits it 2 twitches later. Maybe you can come back in an hour and throw if she's spawning, and you'll catch her because she didn't get hooked. And it just, when you do get a hook in them, they ain't coming off. They're just, I mean, especially if you run those bigger trebs. So I only run 2 hooks on my bait, and I upsize them. Like I said, I mean, I go up to a bigger style treb. And it's just one of those things, like I learned in saltwater, there were times where we would run stinger rigs and on certain baits where they would just choke the bait and you didn't need a stinger. Sometimes that stinger would just get in their lip where it would kind of pull out of the bait at the last second and hook that kingfish in the lip or whatever. And then you don't have a good hook in the fish and it pulls off. Whereas if you just had a single hook on there, she'd have just choked it down and been gut hooked. You're going to gaff the fish anyway, so what's it matter? So that's something to think about. You know, another thing, it keeps from fouling up more if you only run 2 hooks. Another big thing I've noticed is we're in Florida, we're fishing grass. If you set the hook on that fish, right, and she's only, let's say she's got this back hook, okay, and she buries down that hydrilla, now you got 2 hooks that are gonna hook into the grass that could risk pulling the fish off as opposed to 1. So I don't lose nearly as many fish doing this. You know, a lot of people like to just fill their baits with trips. I mean, this is, you can see this Arashi. I don't have a center hook on there. I take it off. Any big spook style bait I run, I always take the middle hook off. I don't think you need it. I haven't lost any fish. If anything, I've gained catching a lot more fish. So something else to think about. It doesn't interfere with the action. It still walks great. And, you know, you just don't foul up. You don't get the hooks all tangled in the middle, and it's just less of a headache. On the same note, something else I'll do, this is something kind of a little sidebar here, throwing a lipless. There are times where I will take that back hook off. I don't do this much. I'd be lying to you if I told you I did this a ton, but have been many times out here on the lake where I've done this, and I'll just go to 1 treb in the middle. If they're really choking that bait for the same reason, because if they're really coming in to just swallow the whole bait, that back hook might interfere with them swallowing the bait and they might just get lip hooked. Whereas if you just had this 1 hook, they could just choke the whole thing down. Now when I do this with the 1 hook, I add an additional split ring. See that? So 1, it lets the bait hang back, the hook hang back just a little bit more when it's running, okay? And the biggest thing is when you do hook them on this, like this, it gives that bait more freedom to spin. See, with 1 O-ring, you know, when that bait spins, it stops and they can throw the hook a lot easier. With this, the bait is swinging a lot more freely and you'll lose less fish like that. So I'll add an additional split ring to that when I do it. I don't do this a ton, as much as I should, but I have played with it on the lake, and it's easier to rip out of the grass again. And when you hook one on this, you know, ripping this out of hydrilla and things like that, there's no other hook to bury down in the grass and to risk pulling the hook out of the fish. So just something to think about. I've been throwing this thing a lot. Like I said, I've been catching a lot of big fish on these walking baits, but I always upsize the hooks, usually 2 sizes. I think these are 1/0. I mean, they're big trebs. I always go with the triple grip style hook. I don't run the feather, like I said. And I'm gonna start upgrading the split rings because I've had a couple of them open, like this one. I caught about a 6-pounder on this, and the split rings started to open up. I doubt you could see that. So got to get some black metal split rings, but other than that, that's the deal. So remember, a lot of times there are cases where less is more, and don't be afraid to take that center hook off of that spook. Don't be afraid to throw a walking bait out here, anywhere you live, even on those bluebird sky days, because they will come up and crush it, even if the conditions don't call for it. So that's it. I appreciate you guys watching. I'm going to go sit on the couch and watch TV because I'm unable to go fishing today. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Tie lines.